up, guys? Welcome to Culture Binge, the Wisecrack podcast, where we explore the cultural zeitgeist for all it has to offer. I'm Michael, joined by Wisecrack former New Jersey Mall Santa Alec and Wisecrack researcher, and, of course, our number one tipper, Serby. How are you all doing today?
Well, thanks. How are you?
Great. Did everyone have a lovely and safe Thanksgiving week holiday?
I ate a bunch of potatoes and stayed home. What more could you ask for?
Wow, that's great. What was your favorite thing that you ate during the holiday, Serby?
I ate 20 cookies.
Okay, need more information. One sitting over
what kind of cookies?
Two sittings.
Okay.
Two sittings, multiple bags of chocolate chip cookies from Trader Joe's. It was delicious.
Wait, they weren't homemade? You just ate cookies out of a bag?
Yeah, because,
Sad.
I mean, it's sad. And that's life.
But also magical.
It was so good. I felt really good about myself afterwards.
Good.
I mean, I finished eating them and I was like, oh gosh, I really accomplished something amazing today.
That's incredible. And I think that Serby's reminding us all that you can do anything if you put your mind to it. Okay, so Serby, thank you so much for the information about your cookie eating adventures. And everyone, if you find that interesting, let us know in the comments, and we can start a spin-off show called Cookie Binge, where once a month Serby eats her favorite grocery store brand cookies and reviews them. Okay, so we're still doing our all slaps and no chap special because the world itself is one giant chap right now. So let's talk about something that's slapping, that's making you feel good, that you're enjoying. Alec, we'll start with you. What's slapping?
I'm reading The Expanse, the book series. There's a TV show based off of it. It's very cool. It's like an anti-Star Trek. It is to Star Trek what, say, George R.R. Martin is to Tolkien. I highly recommend it. I'm on the second book, 70% of the way through it. It's real good.
Amazing. So read that if you like to read things. Serby, how about you?
I really like Money Heist on Netflix. It's about a gang of bank thieves. All of the characters are really interesting. The actors are great. The storyline is so fun. I really love it.
Oh, is that the Spanish show, I think?
Yes, it's the Spanish show.
Oh my God, I've heard of that. That's great. Awesome. Well, and is that on streaming?
It's on Netflix, yes. It's on the streaming.
So awesome. Watch that on Netflix. And then after you watch Money Heist, my slab is also on Netflix. There's a new special. It just came out on December 1st on Netflix. It's called Nate. It's a one-woman show by this comedian, actor, genius named Natalie Palamides. And it's a live show where this woman plays a guy named Nate, and it explores issues of gender, consent. It's very uncomfortable. It's very funny. It involves audience participation. I was at one of the live shows where I intentionally sat 3 rows back because I didn't want to be involved in the show at all, if that tells you anything about it. But it's really powerful, really funny, so go watch that. And then before we get into our topics today, just a reminder, you should subscribe and rate and review and all those things of this podcast. We like it, we appreciate it, and I think we actually have a review from recently. So the last time I asked you all if you wanted to review the podcast on iTunes or whatever, what you could do is say which cocktail we would all be, or a beverage. And someone actually did this, Clark0717. I won't read the whole thing. It's incredible. But Clark0717 did say this: Serby, a hot toddy. That's a good drink. Michael, a margarita. I'll take that. And Alec, a black Russian. And I will say that part of Alec's description was not afraid to go into the darker sides of the cultural zeitgeist. And that's from Dave. So Dave, thank you so much for doing that. But please subscribe, rate, review. And if you want to have fun with your review, tell us which cocktail we would be, what food item we would be, who would play us in a movie, something like that. It's fun. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's get into our topics. The first one is mine. So I wanted to talk a little bit about gender dynamics in sports. And this is sort of motivated by what happened over the weekend. A lot of people heard the story, but a woman named Sarah Fuller made news when she was the first woman to play in a men's college football game for a Power 5 team. Now, there have been 2 women who previously played in college football games, but they were in sort of like lower conferences. So this is the first time someone in one of the big 5 conferences, and these are the sort of teams that, like, I don't know, if you get up early on Saturday and turn on Fox or ABC or something, the type of games you will see. Now, she took on kickoff duties, and for anyone that doesn't know anything about sports, this is when you kick the ball at the beginning of the game to get things going. And she ended up taking on that role because a lot of the other players were out due to COVID, because maybe we shouldn't be playing football right now. Now, Fuller already plays goal for Vanderbilt's women's soccer team. And she actually was a part of helping them win their first SEC title since 1994. And this was a big deal. College football is a very, historically male-dominated sport, a very bro-y sport at that. So having a woman athlete starting a game, on TV, getting the kickoff was a really big deal, and a lot of famous athletes responded to it, and it made a lot of news. There was also some people that talked about it in very stupid ways. When I was researching this, I made myself read a Federalist article that was about how her doing this put women back a bunch of years. It was the dumbest thing I've ever read in my life. But this also accompanies a lot of other recent news of women taking on roles in traditionally male-dominated professional sports. So another story that broke a couple weeks ago is that Kim Ng was hired as the first female general manager of the Miami Marlins baseball team in the MLB. This makes her the first woman general manager of any professional sports team in North American history, and the first Asian American manager in MLB history. And this is after 3 decades of her working in various roles in professional baseball. So that's a huge first over in professional baseball. And then in the NBA, this isn't as recent, but it sort of goes along with this. Becky Hammon, who's an assistant coach for the San Antonio Spurs, she's only the second female coach in NBA history and the first full-time coach, along with the first female head coach in the NBA Summer League, first woman on an NBA All-Star coaching staff. And she's been interviewed to be the GM of a team before. She got a GM interview for the Milwaukee Bucks. And there's definitely talk that she has a chance to be the NBA's first female head coach, and at least be interviewed for those sorts of things. And all of this is interesting because if there's any sort of institution in, at least I'll speak to America, I don't know a ton about the dynamics of professional sports around the world, an institution that is historically deeply male-dominated, it is professional sports. And in particular, it's one of those last areas of life where this gender divide is so intense. And to give another smaller example that might not be considered a professional sport, I've been thinking about ever since this year's American Ninja Warriors finale. American Ninja Warriors is one of my favorite shows. I know I mentioned it before, and they did a bubble version of the season due to COVID. But they did this tournament, and the cool thing about it is one of the final 8 people in the entire competition was a woman named Jessie Flex Lebrec. And the way they do American Ninja Warrior is there's no men's and women's division. Everyone competes together. So it was really cool in this sort of athletic competition that lets everyone compete together to see a lot of the women get just as far as the men and really compete for the final thing there. So I know that you all are not sports heads, let's say. Is that fair?
Yes.
But I mean, have y'all heard about this? And does anyone have any thoughts on sort of the idea of women starting to take on roles in men's sporting leagues?
I haven't heard about it, but I'm really happy to hear about it because I grew up playing a lot of sports, and I always asked my mom why there weren't women in the NFL or MLB or anything like that. And the answers was always just well, they have their own league. And I'm like, but why? Why can't they all be together? Why aren't there any coaches or anything like that? So it's nice to hear that things like that are happening. I don't have too much to add other than it's really nice. And I think the women they have to be quite strong in order to deal with so many men all the time, especially in a field where it's dominated by men so much. So good for them. Yeah.
I also don't know too much, and I probably should have Googled this, but I know I've brought this up before. I think it's interesting that oftentimes sports puts up a strict barrier, and they justify that strict barrier of there's no way that a woman could do these things that a man could do, win in a heavyweight boxing match or something like that. But then in the cases that they can sort of keep up as a kicker or a pitcher or anything else, they're oh, just kidding, we don't allow that. So was it Babe Ruth or Lou Gehrig, or there was some very famous player that got struck out by a female pitcher a very long time ago, and immediately they're women are not allowed to play in Major League Baseball anymore. So it was never really oh, they can't keep up, because as soon as they actually, at least one person was able to keep up, they're no, you are banned from this sport.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think it's interesting too that obviously the example of Fuller is someone playing. Kim Ang is never been a player but worked in all these teams. And Becky Hammon, I should have mentioned as well, who's the first full-time female coach in NBA history, also played in the WNBA, also played in the Russian Professional Basketball League as well. But it's just interesting because so much of professional sports, the culture is tied up in these gender dynamics. And, one of the reasons why historically it's thought that women couldn't like coach or be referees or a part of organizations is that like the culture was too tough, or we can't have women in the locker rooms and all those sorts of things. So I'm really glad to see that dynamic shift. Another thing, and I forgot to mention this, and I sadly didn't research this and get the person's name. That's on me. But the NBA also got its first woman referee in this past season or 2 seasons ago. And that was another thing where there was all this talk of like, well, the referees have to be old men because why would anyone respect someone who wasn't a man? So it's been good to see those boundaries pushed as well. And I think like, I don't know, I just think it's good in general. And I know that maybe we're still a ways away from having, a woman who's like starting on the team in the MLB, NFL, or NBA. To be clear, I hope that happens. But even having it normalized that women can be coaches or referees or parts of teams or on practice squads or whatever, I think is going a long way in like blurring some really unproductive divides in professional sports.
And on the other side, aren't the sports seeing like a huge surge in like female viewership, for instance? Like I feel like when I was growing up, I didn't encounter, a lot of, like I've never liked sports. And so when I would see a bunch of men talking about sports, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to exit from this conversation and go like hang out with the women who are talking about something else. But now I can't do that as much. And not that I don't support their choices of what women want to watch, but it makes my social life more difficult is all I'll say.
Yeah, well, no, but definitely even in like the media, journalism, and hosting side, women have taken on big roles. Shouts to people like Mina Kimes and Haley O'Shaughnessy and a lot of the other younger women who are hosting podcasts and doing on-air commentary and writing for some of the big sports publications. It's just becoming much less of a boys' club, unless you're a part of like Barstool Sports or something. And it's been really good to see those things open up. Because it's like, it's dumb historically, like this idea. Because, there's this whole thing, and I think this is like a Barstool meme, that like Saturdays are for the boys. And that like, for anyone who's not watching this live, Serby did a lovely eye roll that really encapsulated a lot of what I would want to say. But yeah, there's so many ideas around like male sports culture that like Saturdays when the boys kick it and crush some frosty brews and watch some games, and I think that's dumb. And I think and I, as someone who like likes sports and thinks they're really fun, I've often been uncomfortable with some of those dynamics in that, and sometimes I felt like I have to like apologize for myself as a sports fan. And once again, that's why I still like the NBA the best, because they're
Hashtag
the ones...
not all sports fans.
Hashtag not all sports fans, And once again, that's why the NBA is the best. They did the best with COVID. They're making leaps and strides in terms of their gender dynamics. They've been on the right side of a lot of like racial justice issues. So there's good stuff there. And this is also, of course, why everyone should watch American Ninja Warrior, the only professional sport.
I don't mind that show. I have watched it and I enjoy it. I find it much more enjoyable than all the other sports combined.
Have there been any interviews with these women to ask about their experiences?
Yeah, so Kim Ang, for example, the woman who was hired as the general manager of the Miami Marlins, which is a huge first, running a professional baseball team. The New York Times did a really big feature on her a couple weeks ago that gets into her family background, the story of how she got there, and talking about all the, hurdles she had to face to get to the position she's in, because she worked in professional baseball for 30 years. And in the as far back as the early 2000s, people she worked for are quoted in this article saying like they thought she needed to be considered for general manager positions, and the consensus is that she's the most qualified first-time GM in the history of baseball.
Wow!
Because of everything she went through to do that. So yeah, a good amount there. And then there's been a few big features on Becky Hammon before as well, and Greg Popovich, who's the coach of the San Antonio Spurs. That hired her for her first job there, and he's great, really good, woke old guy. Has had overwhelmingly positive things to say about her, as well as a lot of the players who have been there. So, if anyone is interested in any of this stuff, via some simple Googling, the world will be at your fingertips. Just don't look at any of the weird incel-y takes on any of these people, because you have better things to do with your time.
Now I'm very you've made me interested. I have to look into the Abyss.
Look into the Abyss. But once again, the simplest thing for all this, if this sounds interesting, go on streaming and watch the past season of American Ninja Warrior. I'm not going to tell you. I think I already told you the names of one of the women that goes really far, but it's really incredible and really fun to see. I don't know. I think, and I know it's silly that I'm so obsessed with that show, but it's just so cool to see everyone compete together, young, old, across gender lines, sexual preferences, all sort of stuff. It's just fun. Let's let everyone compete together.
I like that.
That's all I got. Yeah. So unless there's anything else, we'll leave it there. As always, let us know what you think about that. But before we go any further, speaking of games that we can all play together, regardless of who we are, I want to tell you about a really fun card game called Forks in the Timeline. Now, I don't know if anyone's heard of this before. It's a really cool game. It allows you to join a journey of discovery through the fabric of time, space, and open some doors in the multiverse. Okay, so this game features 100 cards which present alternative realities and 100 random questions, and you pair them up and you get some really fun, wild combinations. Now, this is something you play with friends. You all come up with your answers. People are going to say crazy stuff, funny stuff, weird stuff. So here's an example. So you're going to take a fork card when you play this game. Maybe your fork card says, in a timeline where the purge was a real event. Whew. Then we get our question card. You got a second stack. Okay, it's not hard. You know what I'm talking about. Second card says something like, what would make your parents proud? So here's what we're doing. We're coming up with answers to, in a timeline where the purge was a real event, what would make your parents proud? The judge is going to pick their favorite answers, and we're getting points based off that. So you're competing in ways that are fun. Now, former legend of the game, Jared, of Wisecrack fame, the first person on our Mount Rushmore, he liked this game and said it helped him with his writing. So if you're a creative person that likes coming up with cool scenarios, or you want to have some new inspiration, Forks in the Timeline could really help you with that. Just examples of some other questions that you could have that could pair up. Like in a timeline where there was suddenly no scientific progress, would communism work? In a timeline where humans lived underwater, is America the land of opportunity? These are just some random pairs. I'm just picking those off the list. You can see that this is really fun. I kind of want to do it right now, but I know we have things we got to do with this podcast. Now, if you think this game sounds fun, which you should, I think it sounds fun. You think it sounds fun, and this is also a thing we could play. We could play via distance with friends, whether that's sitting 6 feet apart or digitally. There's ways we can do this. There's a link in the show notes, so check that out, or go to, and you'll remember this, forksinthetime.com. That's www.forksinthetime.com, and use the promo code WHAM, 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 and you can get 15% off the game. I'm not kidding when I say this. I'm going to be playing this game soon because I recently had a falling out with my partner over a game of Monopoly. It got too serious.
Why would you ever play Monopoly?
Monopoly's
it was the
fun.
worst night of my life. Hated it. When I lost real bad, I got real upset. Then she got mad at me for being real upset. And I just said, can't we play a fun game? A game where the stakes aren't like, I'm better at managing real estate, right? That's what something like Forks in the Timeline would be great for that. Because we just get to have fun, screw around, come up with some funny scenarios, laugh, learn about each other, and fall deeper in love. So I think if you want to spark your relationship, Forks in the Timeline. If you want to fall in love with a new partner, Forks in the Timeline. If you want to reconnect with a parent who just found you on Ancestry.com, Forks in the Timeline.
Forks in the Timeline is the type of thing that I would love, because I love asking these types of questions. Like, what would happen if your name was like Bartholomew? And this is so much better than that. It's the kind of thing that would spark interesting conversations and would help you like see how a person thinks and learn more about their perspectives.
Yeah. Well, listen, if Wisecrack ever did something crazy, like had like a all-day stream or something, maybe we could work a game of Forks in the Timeline into there. I don't know. It sounds fun. But once again, check it out. forksinthetime.com. Type in WHAM. You're getting 15% off. You're having fun. No one loses in this transaction, okay? But speaking of losing and maybe having a bad time at something that should be fun, Serby, I think you're here to tell us about some issues with safety in tourism and travel.
So Joy, our wonderful producer, sent us an article. Pardon?
Sorry, I just yelled wonderful when you said Joy, our wonderful producer, to like sort of second that notion. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, really, really disrupted my train of thought there. So she sent us this article about a a volcano eruption in New Zealand last year. And New Zealand officials recently filed safety violation charges against several organizations and individuals after this eruption killed 22 people last year around this time. So White Island was a popular tourist destination, but due to increased seismic activity for a couple of weeks, experts raised the alert level. And despite these warnings, private companies were still taking tourist groups to the island. And during one of these trips, there was an eruption, 22 people died, and those that didn't die had severe burns. And an official connected to the case said the victims all had an expectation they could go to the island believing the organizations involved had fulfilled requirements to look after their health and safety. This story made me so sad because when you're on vacation, you're having a good time, and the worst thing happened. So I started to think a lot. I've been thinking a lot about everything just because I have nothing else to do. And one of the things that I've been thinking about quite a bit is traveling. And I've been fortunate to be able to travel quite a bit. And the one thing that I've been thinking about the most is how often I have put myself in danger because I stop thinking critically when I'm on vacation. And I get so focused on seeing something or doing something that I don't take the time to research properly or to pause and consider my actions. And I'm not saying that the victims of this volcano should have known better or should have done their own research, but I'm thinking more about how I'm an extremely cautious person by nature, and I'm the type of person who researches and plans and knows everything in and out. But as soon as I'm on vacation, it's like I'm a completely different person, and I'm probably more carefree and more fun, but also a bit more reckless. And it's a scary thing because it's the sort of thing that I would never do at home, but when I'm away from home, I just will put my life in the hands of others very freely. So I'm very curious whether the two of you do the same thing, or if you have any stories or experiences when you felt like, oh, that was a near miss and your travels could have taken a bad turn.
I mean, like, the psychology of what you're exploring is really interesting. And if I know we have listeners that are like experts in psychology and grad students and professionals. And if you know if there's a name for this symptom, let us know. But I definitely relate to that feeling that you're out of your normal comfort zone, and you have less of this, like, it almost feels like you have less of an evolutionary drive for survival. Mm-hmm. Like, you feel like things can't happen, or like there's a magical safety net underneath you. And I know I've been places before where, like, I've gone on hikes that I wasn't supposed to go on. I went to the edge of a cliff because I thought it was fun that I would normally never do, or, you know, gone out late in cities I've never been before where people speak a language I don't understand, and drank too much and just thought everything would work out, where I would never do that where I live. So I do think there is this sense sometimes we have, it's almost like we think that we are the protagonist in some like early 2000s self-discovery travel film or something, like our own little Eat, Pray, Love.
And you have this invincibility bubble around you where everything's magical.
And I think with like the volcano thing, especially with anything nature related, like once I went did some gnarly rock climbing in a different country, and I'm terrified of heights. And when I say terrified of heights, like I don't like to, like, I can't go on water slides at water parks because I hate walking up the stairs because my legs start shaking. But you go someplace else and you start climbing around, and it's almost this mindset of like, this isn't real. What could happen? I'm not at home, so everything's okay. Someone needs to help us diagnose this. Alec, I wonder about you. Do you become a more reckless version of yourself when outside of your home space?
I've only traveled internationally twice, and the first time I was 19, I went to Costa Rica. And nice. I'm not a great planner, and so I think what I did is I printed out like the directions. I was staying at this place. It was very far away, and I printed out the directions. I never read them before I got there. Basically, I was reading one step. Like, I wasn't reading ahead. And so, for instance, I got on a bus. It took all day. At night, it just stopped in this town. And I was like, all right, when's the bus going again? And they're like, no, it's done for the night. And so I was like, okay, like I'm a broke 19-year-old. Now I have to find a place to stay. I stayed. They're like, the bus will be back here at like 7 a.m. tomorrow to take you the rest of the way. I was like, okay. And then I show up, and the directions just say like, ask for Ricardo, who will take you on a boat to where you're staying. And so I just start asking strangers where this guy is. They're like, oh, he collects the trash today. He won't be here till tomorrow. So then I have to find another guy to give me a boat ride. And the man is very cool. Actually, his name might have been Ricardo. I'm getting the names confused. But I was on a boat with a stranger. He stops the engine and approaches a boat full of people wielding machetes. And I was, just like an ignorant 19-year-old. I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to die. People are going to hack me up with machetes. Turns out just fishermen carry machetes. And he was throwing them a 6-pack of beer. Everything was fine. But that's not, that process of what I did is not maybe what an adult alc would do. And I don't, now I plan ahead, and I have a partner that forces me to plan ahead. But I mean, it's still like you go to another country and like you book a tour guide, and it's like I'm getting in the stranger's car, and like who the fuck knows?
But here's the question: do we think this is a good thing? Like, because the frame in which we're talking about this is sort of like in real life we're good, but then we go travel and we're like bad or reckless. But should we be more open to experience in our everyday scenario? Or is what we're really saying that we get too buttoned up in our day-to-day, and we should be, Serby should be travel Serby, and normal Alec should be, waiting for Ricardo Alec? Like,
well, I don't know. I mean, the one half of Serby's story is like this company that I feel like we're forgetting about. This company like put their clients at risk because like they needed to keep operating, and then killed 22 people. Yeah, and then the other side is just like, it's not a suspension of disbelief when you're traveling, but just like, okay, I'm going to show up and I'm going to trust that the tour guide is going to take me where I need to go. They're not going to kill me in a car accident. They're not going to take me to a volcano that's about to explode. They're not going to take me to a building that might collapse. Like there's that side of things as well, which I don't want to ignore. I don't mean to completely deflect Serby.
Yeah. We do not want to send people to their deaths, just to be clear.
I think that I could maybe be a little bit more carefree in my daily life, but when I think back about like what is the worst thing that could happen, the worst thing that could happen is I could die in a volcano explosion or eruption. And so I'd rather be a bit more cautious. And when I reflect back on these experiences, when like I probably would have been kidnapped in China, or the time the guy followed me for half a day in Paris, like things like that, like make me, they make me go cold inside. And so at the time it was like, oh, I've seen that guy before. Like, no, I see that guy again. And also, where am I in China? Like, I don't even know where I am. And the doors aren't opening on this taxi.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So things like that, like, it's not so much like I go down like a dark alley, which I also have done, but it's also things like why do I just stop thinking? And so this thing about the volcano, I 100% probably would have been like, volcano sounds amazing, let's go.
Yeah.
Without even just Googling like what's the situation with the volcano right now.
Especially in New Zealand, right? I feel like New Zealand is one of those countries that I would intuitively be like, this isn't a reckless or crazy place. Like, everything's safe here. They have their awesome prime minister who says everything right. Yeah. Like 4-day work weeks are good.
A volcano just seems so like clearly dangerous. You're like, well, if they're taking me, it must not be, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like no one's like, hey, we're going to take you into this burning building. Or like, well, they must know what they're doing because they wouldn't take me otherwise, you know?
Yeah. Then I guess the volcano thing too is like, what is it about our desire to like put ourselves in positions that we know are objectively dangerous? Like certain things, like I have no desire to skydive, right? You could tell me it's safe, but I'm jumping out of a fucking plane if I do that. Doesn't sound fun. Whereas a volcano is the same thing, where like a volcano is something that can cause massive destruction. Maybe that just shouldn't be a thing we do for fun. Whereas going on like, I don't know, a hike or a pub tour of Dublin might be a more normative way to spend some time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, this is all really
very depressing.
Too, yeah, well, and the even more depressing thing is it's going to be a long time until we can really suss out and try out these theories, because I don't think any of us are going to be going on international jaunts anytime soon.
According to the CDC, some small groups of people, I think it's old people and healthcare workers, are getting vaccines in February or March.
So it's just going to be
so your grandma can travel.
Grandma and like nurses and hospital workers on well-earned vacations will just be living it up, partying.
Oh my
in
God.
Ibiza.
Can you imagine if just like right now, if I see any of my friends traveling, I'm like, you're an asshole. But if it was just like a nurse really, like if I had a friend that was a nurse just really flaunting, like, I'm going to travel the world and be safe. And like, I would be both jealous and be like, you deserve it.
Yeah. I'd be
Can I
thrilled.
interject with one thing too, just because this is a thing that happened in my life over the weekend? If you're going to travel right now, especially if you're going to travel internationally, like, if that's what you're going to do, that's what you're going to do. But keep it to your damn self. Don't put it all over your social media and flaunt it. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. This person would never listen to this podcast or watch it anyways, but a friend, I guess, traveled internationally from America and just like all over their Instagram stories and social media, just like documenting the trip, complaining about the plane. It's like, dog, what are you doing? Sorry.
I'm surprised
Yeah.
countries even are letting Americans in. I thought it was just like Croatia.
Well, and then this person is like, oh, I wonder if they're going to let me in at the border. Like, if you have to ask that question, maybe you shouldn't be going, you idiot.
Yeah, we have a travel channel at work, and one of my coworkers went to, I think it was like Tahiti or Bora Bora or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it just like, the whole thing was like, feels so good to be traveling again. And I'm like, ooh, I'm like, I don't know, man.
Yeah. At Wisecrack, our travel channel is comparing where we got lunch in the greater Los Angeles area and how alive it made us feel. So,
Do we have a travel
sorry.
channel? I'm not in it.
We don't. That was okay, but I really like that topic, and I think, yeah, I want to hear more about this. And if people have had stories of travel like that, we want to hear them, but we'll get to how you can tell us that later. Speaking of, death-defying controversy, Alec, supposedly there has been some news, some drama in the young author space, in particular young authors or YA authors on Twitter talking about classic literature, and things have gotten pretty heated. Can you let us know what we need to know about this?
Yeah, and for context, I generally avoid like one random person on the internet said something dumb. There's a lot of internet content about that. I want to avoid that. But these are all published YA authors. One of them had a check mark. They said something that I think is, well, a few people said different things. Some of them I find very dumb. But I'm not going to name their names just because like they protected their tweets and are getting harassed. And I don't, I might want to criticize what they have to say, but I'm not going to like go harass them or encourage other people to harass them or send them DMs with like horrifying messages. So don't do that. But that being said, there was a tweet by a young adult author who basically made a list, which was like, what are like the worst classic books? It's fine. Like number 1 is Moby Dick. It's boring. Like, should kids be reading at school because it's going to teach them how to hate reading? That's a fair enough question. Like, you don't have to. You could love Moby Dick and still understand that like maybe it's not right for freshmen in high school. Anyway, author gets to number 3. The tweet is, okay, I got distracted by all of you tweeting me about these awful classic books I'd blocked, but my number 3 is The Adventures of Huck Finn. Can we stop with the racist books already? To which another young adult author responded, so much racism in that book. There was a lot of exclamations between the words. And then another author said, what I assume my teachers were trying to teach me with classics. Incest is okay if your dad refuses to confirm your siblings. That's Wuthering Heights. It's okay to obsess over a past to the point of stalking if you're rich. Great Gatsby. And racism, am I right? That's Huck Finn. And so, I mean, I think the last tweet is probably the dumbest, but I have a lot of thoughts and could ramble, but I'm sure lots of you, 2 of you already have thoughts immediately. What do you think?
This is so stupid. I have so many thoughts about this. So I have thoughts about like the YA like author community in general, but also about this argument. So you can use literature as a means to discuss the history of racism, discrimination, and other problematic issues. Like, literature shouldn't be about providing idealized versions of people and society. It's about storytelling and capturing a snapshot of how people perceive the world. And it's naive to think that that Huckleberry Finn, the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, or Peter Pan, or Little House on the Prairie promote racism, because it overlooks the fact that these are complex storylines or characters, and you can think that someone is a good person, but that doesn't mean that they have good ideas. Like, good people can believe bad things, and I think that it's important to remember that. And if you have issues with these things, you can look up critical responses. It doesn't teach children that racism is okay or incest is okay. It shows them about the diversity of life. And if it makes you uncomfortable, think about how it makes those targeted groups feel.
Yeah, and I think I was trying to tangle apart, at least with the last tweet, it's like not understand. Like The Great Gatsby is a book about how lusting after wealth will destroy you. And so when, Gatsby does all these awful things, it's not like, check this out, it's super cool. And so with Huckleberry Finn is really interesting, and sort of to what you said, I think there's like legitimate debates about it. But I think like those are debates that could be, or conversations that could happen in classrooms. And I read into it a little bit because I've heard what I consider is like the dumb criticism of it. And I want to know if there was like a better criticism of Huck Finn. And so just to lay it out for anyone who hasn't read it, Huckleberry Finn is written by Mark Twain. Basically a white kid runs away with a slave named Jim. This kid sees the humanity in Jim as slave while the rest of society is trying to tell him that he's less than human. A lot of shenanigans ensue, whatever. This was written in 1880 something, right after the Civil War. Mark Twain was an early outspoken opponent of slavery and racism. At the same time, what I did find was like maybe the smarter criticism is that the third act, basically Mark Twain started using like minstrel humor to appeal to his white audience. But again, like, Ralph Ellison, who's like one of my favorite authors, I was looking into this, wrote a great essay, and I have that written down somewhere. I started reading a little bit of it. It is called 20th Century Fiction and the Black Mask of Humanity. There's been like a lot of talk about this Mark Twain, and he basically says the last act of Mark Twain, is important to the story where other authors have not said. The point is, that's like the smarter argument that you could still teach in schools. The dumber version is like the book uses the N-word, but again, it's depicting, pre-Civil War South, where like it's about how the word is dehumanizing. And so I feel like that's like a dumb thing. And one book even went so far, one publication of it went so far as to replace the N-word with the word slave, which is inaccurate because not everyone some of the people were free black men, which obviously they weren't slaves. So anyway, that's the dumb part. And so I think that part of it's dumb, but I think there is like a smarter part of this argument that I don't know if it's being made. This is all in the context of like, what's being assigned in schools. And I think the bad version of this is like, let's cancel Huck Finn because it's bad. But the other thing is there's like lots of good books about slavery, about racism in America. I haven't read Huckleberry Finn in a while, but I remember really enjoying it. I think it's a very important book, and I would recommend to anyone who hasn't read it. But at the same time, like there's other, great books by people like Toni Morrison or Octavia Butler or, Ralph Ellison or Richard Wright about, whether it's racism in America or slavery. At the same time, Mark Twain is one of the few books that was sort of written contemporarily. And so I think it could have a good discussion with a classroom about like, hey, this guy like wants to disrupt slavery, but at the same time is like still making these pitfalls. So sorry, that's my rant.
Yeah. Like I won't watch the original Star Wars because I don't endorse incestual desire, but everything else sounds good here. No, yeah, I mean, there's almost nothing else left to say because you all really hit all the nails on the head here. It's a stupid critique that views literature and fictional art as instruction manuals that give like advice on how to live, rather than descriptions of what the world has looked like at various points that allow the reader that presume the intelligence of the reader to interpret and learn and listen and explore. And I think that's the thing that upsets me most about that, is the idea that these authors think that people are idiots, and these people aren't intelligent enough to read something, to understand the context, and to see what's going on. It'd be like if a film critic watched The Wolf of Wall Street and was like, I can't believe that this film openly endorses, financial crimes and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, idiots. The whole film is about how this guy's life falls apart because of greed and selfishness and blah, blah, blah. Fun movie, too. But yeah, I guess that's the part that offends me the most. And it worries me that, like, I don't know, it worries me that things turn in such a way where there's not room for, messy fiction and films and satirical accounts of things that explore bad ideas through heightening certain contradictions in culture. I don't know, just bums me out.
Yeah,
I just want to link them to the Thug Notes videos on some of these books.
We should do that. Someone respond, not us, someone who's listening or watching, respond to all these YA authors. Don't say anything mean.
Don't respond to any of the. No, they've already
Never mind.
Protected their accounts anyway.
Don't do anything. Don't listen.
I also think another issue is that I think oftentimes with like dumb criticism comes dumb backlash. Like the backlash to the dumb thing is even dumber, which is like Mark Twain must be defended at all cost. How dare you? Because I think again, like he's a product of his time, possibly criticizable. The book is certainly not perfect, and at the same time, there are other books about this topic that could easily be taught. But it's not like fuck Mark Twain, he's canceled. It's like, oh, here's one book about slavery, but there's also like Roots by Alex Haley, and Alex Haley made a bunch of it up. But like, is that worse than what Mark Twain did? Or, there's Beloved by Toni Morrison, which I think is slightly after the Civil War, or, Octavia Butler has done some fiction on there. And so it's not like, hey, we have all these options. What do we choose? Like, I think the response of we have to keep Mark Twain in our curriculum at all costs is dumb, because even though it's valuable, like lots of other things are also valuable.
Yeah, it's a really good point. We shouldn't be precious on either side of this.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think it's frustrating that it's authors that are saying this. It's such a superficial argument, and it's exactly what I would expect from a young adult author. I used to work in
shots.
Well, I used to work in like that industry, and like the book publishing industry, and so that's exactly like the kind of like weird, like hive-minded, juvenile thinking. Like as soon as I saw the tweet, I was like, 100% that's somebody from YA, and I looked it up, and I'm like, yeah.
I'm honestly curious because I know it gets a lot of flack. There's like various controversies and whatnot. It seems very competitive. It seems like there's good YA and bad YA, as there are all things with all genre, but it seems like there's a lot of drama. And whenever like drama intersects with social issues, it can create like a lightning rod of both like undeserved, but sometimes deserved attention,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I like YA. I mean, I read some YA. There's some really great stuff out there.
But which is, that's a bad book. I'm canceling Harry Potter.
Harry Potter is a classic that should be read in every year. But I think there's great stuff, but I think that the authors have a tendency to cause a lot of drama and just like jump on the bandwagon. Like, yeah, there is racism. We should stop reading this. So.
Yeah. I just think if you can't understand The Great Gatsby, you're probably not a very good writer. I will say that.
If you're a YA author or fan, I just want to know all about it. It's a thing I don't understand, and I want to know more about it.
Yeah, I don't understand it either, because I'm gonna preface this. This is a stupid thing I'm about to say, but we all think stupid stuff intuitively sometimes, and if you don't, I guess you're better than me. But yeah, my thought is always like, I don't know, like how young are you that you can't just read real books?
Oh.
So
I know that's dumb, but that's a bad thought. I know that's a bad thought. I'm acknowledging it.
That's a dumb take.
Yeah.
It is a dumb take, but that's what I'm saying. Okay, if we're going to act like no one has dumb takes, I think that we need to normalize dumb takes from non-dumb people, because we all have them sometimes, and that's where my dumb brain goes. I understand why we need it, because it's fiction that is from the perspective of people that age and explores their world in a literal way. So a 14-year-old in 2020 doesn't have to read a book about a 35-year-old in 1917. I
will say Mark Twain wrote YA. I don't know if you'd call it that, but Tom
Definitely
Sawyer
did.
Tom Sawyer, and I even think Huck Finn. I think kids were still reading it, and back then there's like a lot of illiteracy, and so like you weren't gonna sit down with something like Moby Dick or something like much harder. You're like, oh, I'm gonna read this fun story.
Yeah, but why wouldn't I just watch YouTube videos if I'm young? Why would I read a book?
So as somebody who has read YA and does enjoy some YA books, I read it sometimes because it's just, I feel like sometimes it's more imaginative, or it's lighter than something else. Like if I have to concentrate all day long and I'm focused, and then I have to read something else, then I have to be focused. But if I read something YA, it just feels more fun. And
so it's like Emily in Paris, right?
I was just gonna say
it's kind of
that.
like Emily in Paris. It's like, yeah, I'm probably not going to walk away feeling more intelligent, but it's diverting and enjoyable.
Wow. We really went some places with this discussion.
Yeah. I mean, talked about how I almost got snatched in China, and then we went into how I hate YA authors.
Yeah. Wow, this has really been a journey. Well, unless there's any other thoughts on that, I will say, if you, and by you, I mean the viewer, the listener, the one who is consuming this content but is still an active part of the conversation, don't get me wrong, if you have thoughts on anything we've talked about today or anything else, we would love to hear them. And we'd love to hear them via your written words or your spoken voice. So you could get in touch with us. So you can give us a call or you can email us. If you want to call us at 213-534-8807. That is 213-534-8807. Or email us at culturebinge@wisecrack.co. No M. culturebinge@wisecrack.co. We'd love to hear from you. It means a lot to us to hear from you. And I don't know how many times I can say that over and over. We love it. It's meaningful to us. You're a part of this family, and we want to hear from you. So I think we have some voicemails, some emails from the last time. So Alec, what do you have for us? What have you expertly curated?
The expert, we've got 2 voicemails. The first one, if we could play, is about someone asking us for Christmas advice. If you
can't wait.
want advice on how to ghost your family for the holidays, just message us. It'll keep my mind distracted. I don't have YA to turn to. But Joy, can you play that?
Hey, Wisecrack. I'm calling for the Culture Binge team. I'd love to get some advice on what I should do for Christmas regarding traveling home to see family. So a little background. I just got my first out-of-college job, which required me to relocate out of state from where the majority of my family lives. And I was hoping to be able to go home for Christmas because, we're all keeping our fingers crossed that by the end of the year, things would have turned around, but obviously that is not the case. And with that said, I actually already have plane tickets home, but generally don't want to go home if it means A, not being able to see people, if I did some kind of quarantine, or B, if I saw people potentially infecting or harming my elder relatives. Both my parents are in the susceptible age group, plus my grandparents, so it doesn't actually make a lot of sense. The complication is that I can't use the time off of work, because between paid time off and my company giving us a full week between New Year's and Christmas Day, plus weekends on either side, I get like 17 days off at the end of the year. Of course, that's not actually enough time to do a full quarantine at home to safely see people. So I'm not really sure what the best solution is. I've talked with my parents about getting a COVID test before getting on the plane, getting one right after, and just hoping for the best and being safe to whatever extent I can. But obviously that's hardly foolproof. So if you have any thoughts on how to safely travel home, or what to say to my parents to soften the blow of canceling my trip, I'd love to hear it. Thanks. I love your show, and you guys are really helping me get through this tough year. Bye.
Oh, thank you so much.
He has such a nice voice.
Oh, my kind of question that makes this hard to answer is like, where are the parents at? Like, do the parents think the virus is real? Do they not think it's real? Unfortunately, because I think that changes it. But like, I'm going to assume they understand that's real. But sorry, Serby, Michael, do you have thoughts?
I do. So a friend of mine has to travel quite a bit for work. So if you do decide to travel home, she wears 2 masks and a face shield. She also wears covers up head to toe, like hoodie, everything, and has like little gloves. And she bought this thing on Amazon. I was trying to find it while we were talking, but it's like a spray that she sprays on her seat and on the tray table and everything. And it's like real. No, it's real. It's like, and it's been approved by the CDC. It says it's like a sanitizer thing that can kill COVID or whatever. So, I think
usually those things say they don't work on porous surfaces, like well,
I don't know. She hasn't had COVID and she's been traveling everywhere.
Well, in that case, travel, have fun, get out there.
No, I'm not saying to travel, but I'm saying that
I think
if
Serby's
you
trying
are
to do
going
harm
to
reduction.
travel,
yeah, she is.
Then do that. So You can get the tests before and after, maybe stay in a hotel. If you do stay at a hotel, Hilton does a really great job with cleaning.
Whoa, unless they are paying us money to say this on the podcast, we are not giving free ads to Hilton.
Hilton does a really great job, so you can maybe stay there a night while you get like a rapid test done. And then if you don't go, maybe you can do like a Zoom call. I know it sounds super boring, but you can do like a Zoom Christmas call, and maybe try to play a game or like ship presents and then open them on the call together. And maybe like plan something for next year, like later in the year. This way you have something to look forward to.
Okay, so I feel like we're doing good cop, bad cop now. So I feel like Serbia is good cop. I'll quickly be bad cop.
Okay, I want to be bad cop too.
Okay, also, if anyone from Hilton is listening, Serbia deserves something for that. Please give her a gift certificate for like a long weekend at the Hilton Resort of her choice. Okay, here's what I think. I think you shouldn't go, and I think it's hard, and it's really hard. And I know that I think you said you just graduated recently. The sad thing is it never really gets easier to like say no to parents, because that pressure is very real. So I just want you to know I very much empathize with that, and I'm very much lucky that I'm not getting that these days. But I think there's a way to just say, I'm not going to come home this Christmas. I love the shit out of you guys. I'm going to miss you so much, and this sucks, but I just want to be safe. I don't want to be anxious about this, and I don't even want there to be a 1% chance that I get you or anyone else sick. That said, let's figure out something fun to do in the meantime. We can watch the same movie. We'll sing some carols together over Zoom, and let's make Christmas 2021 just, let's blow the goddamn roof off that time. But I think you can say that, and I think long term they will understand. That said, it's going to be a bummer. There's no way for this not to be a bummer.
Yeah, I agree with Michael. And I mean, my personal take, and again, this is contingent on if they think the virus is real and generally respect like public health authorities. But I would just be like, listen, public health authorities are basically begging and pleading to please stay home. Thanksgiving, we haven't even seen the effects of it, but if you want to stall a little bit in 2 weeks, I'm sure the numbers will be a fucking nightmare. And so I'd be like, they're begging us. I just feel like, to Michael's point, I don't want to get you sick. Also, I mean, I know that they're the ones at risk, but, you could get it from them, even, if you're quarantining and see them and then you get on a plane. And with the plane, everyone focuses on, like sanitizing your space. But, what I've been reading is a lot of times it's like the actual airport itself. You have to get on, you're mingling with people. People aren't wearing their mask. And, masks do have a protective benefit, but the best protection is when other people are wearing masks, of course, being very far away from them. And so while there is a benefit to wearing a mask and protecting yourself, it's not as protective as, making sure everyone else around you is in a dum-dum, which you can't control. And then on the question of the testing, and I'm not just armchair public healthing, but like this is, public health experts are saying, tests are not like a reliable way to know for certain. So you could get tested on a Thursday, but then you're infectious or sort of develop the symptoms or the viral load that would be detectable on Friday or Saturday. And so like a test really will only tell you if you're good for that day. And even there's, a false negativity rate. So I think it's not, unless you're going to get tested like 4 times and also quarantine, like that's an idea. But I would also say in general, people, myself included, are not as good at quarantining as they think they are. I had a family member said they were quarantining. Turns out they were going to the grocery store like 4 times a day. So not trying to say that you're bad at it, but yeah, just...
Yeah, and just quickly before we move on to the next thing, if you need proof for this, we're recording this on December 2nd. The literal headline of the New York Times today says CDC warns against holiday travel.
Yeah.
So if you need to be like the Big Brother says I can't travel, there you go.
The other option is lie. Say you don't have those days off. Say a project came up.
Lying is awesome.
I also think you shouldn't go, but I think that saying no to your parents is hard, even now at my age. It doesn't feel good. It's not going to feel good. And during the holidays when you're home alone, you're going to feel really bad and wish that you had gone. Or maybe you'll be like, I did the right thing. But either way, you're going to feel bad. It's not going to be easy. So you have to do what's best for your health and the health of those around you.
That's real. Okay, so let's go. And thank you once again for your voicemail. Hopefully we have some help. But we, just to be clear, we completely empathize with that. You got to do what you got to do. Alec, what's next?
I think we're a little short on time, so I'm going to skip the next voicemail and go straight to emails. Serby, you requested someone to email you from who has been to or is involved with the sex club, and the internet responded.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
So there's an email from Lawrence. Good day, Wisecrack. I'm writing in today in response to Serby's comments at the end of episode 41 about her curiosity about underground sex clubs. My partner Jessica and I have run a sex club in Sydney, Australia for almost 7 years. It's named Our Secret Spot if you feel like giving a cheeky plug. I don't mind at all. For context, we are a legally run business that is registered with our local government, pay our taxes and insurances, so not entirely underground as the name would suggest. Late last year, we opened a second venue here in Sydney. We were doing quite well as business. Then COVID hit, Australia went into indefinite nationwide lockdown, and our business was forced to close. We were extremely concerned that we were going to lose all that we had worked so hard for and lose a lot of money that we had just spent into building our new venue. Like so many other small businesses, we had to do what was socially responsible, but we could have ended up bankrupt as a result. It was such an upsetting time. Fortunately, our landlords came to our assistance and offered us a rent-free period until we could trade again. We still had to pay outgoing expenses, but at least a major overhead was removed for us. After 3 months or so, we were permitted to open by our state government with new conditions and restrictions. God, restrictions on a sex club. What does that even look like? But I'm very curious. We put in a COVID-safe plan as directed by our Department of Health and opened for trade in July. Our reopening party was a sellout. Initially, there was some awkwardness with people mingling at a bar after months of being locked down and quarantined, but the mood of the crowd quickly changed. Not as much sex took place as usual. I suppose people were just happy to be out and socializing in general. We did lose our original venue, though. When the government permitted us to open, the landlord became aggressive and unreasonable with demands. It was a shame to close the first, but allowed us to focus on our new baby. Something unexpected has happened, though. Our business has never been more profitable. Part of our restriction is to have a fewer number of clubs. This has created scarcity, and as a result, the demand for tickets has never been consistently higher. We know our business is high risk and raises eyebrows about whether or not we are doing what we are doing is socially responsible. Some members of the community made anonymous calls to the police to say that we're breaking COVID public health orders. We've had 4 separate visits from police on nights we've been trading. The sergeant at our local police station now knows our business, is impressed with how diligent we are with following all the regulations and restrictions. So what started as a nightmare has turned into something quite positive for us. Serby, when we can all travel again, you should make the journey down to Australia and visit our club.
Yeah, Serby, visit their club.
Bring your interested friend too. Plus, we don't have a culture of tipping here either. Ha.
Wow. I wonder, you should ask if Wisecrack correspondent Austin Smith has ever been there in Sydney local. It sounds like up his alley.
He seems like that kind of guy, yeah.
Wow, that's great.
I'm so curious. Sorry, go ahead, Serby.
I am so excited about this. I will 100% go visit there as soon as I can start traveling again. I have a friend who lives in Melbourne, and my other friend, the one who's also interested in sex clubs, she and I will both stop by. This is fantastic. Yeah. I'm so excited. I'm going to email you because I have so many questions.
Well, Lawrence, I need to know what do COVID safe restrictions mean in a restaurant? You're like, people need to sit 6 feet apart, but as I understand, the goal there is to fuck people, and so I don't. Whoa. Do they wear face masks while they're fucking?
Maybe condoms, hand sanitizer. Maybe they open all the windows to let
people
air
slather
in.
themselves in hand sanitizer. Then they do the nasty.
Maybe you're not allowed to kiss, like
in Pretty Woman.
Yeah. But I applaud you for following the local regulations, whatever they may be. Go ahead, Mike.
And Lawrence, I just want to say I would love to volunteer and offer myself. If you ever need a guest bartender, I don't want to participate in sex club activities, not because it doesn't sound rad. I'm just kind of in a situation that would make that impossible. I would love to guest bartend. I'm good at chatting with people. I can make a mean drink. Let me know. I love to do it. And I know there's not a tipping culture, so I won't expect tips.
Excellent. So after I'm done having sex with everyone, I'll come get a drink and I'm not going to tip you.
I think I would have a skill looking at someone in a postcoital state and knowing exactly what they would need at that point. So I'll call that shot. Do we have time for any other emails, Alec? Yeah,
we could do. Here's an email from Michael. about academia. Hey there, Wisecrack. Last week on Culture Binge, Mr. Burns made some comments on the value of non-academia and even made a joke about Alec being lesser in debt. These comments struck very closely to home for the situation I currently find myself in. I would love to hear your thoughts and, if you'd be so generous, advice for me in this predicament. When I was a senior in high school, I was very overwhelmed and frustrated with being told that at 18 years old, I was supposed to decide what school I wanted to attend, what career path to pursue, and put myself into a large amount of student debt to make this a reality. At 18 years old, I was being asked this question. I didn't even know what I was going to have for dinner that night. Nonetheless, what I wanted to do for the next 40 years. Regretfully, now at 25 years old, the anxiety of this caused me not to pursue any kind of secondary education. So I've held down the same job I had in high school while getting raises and promotions whenever possible, so I can enjoy a fairly stable lifestyle. Being able to comfortably pay my bills while also being debt-free has allowed me the luxury of putting money back into savings and safety funds, has made the year with COVID fairly stress-free for me compared to several of my peers who have no such savings. However, my company will be changing hands at the first of the year, and suddenly I find myself in the job market. I've been assured by several managers that I've spoken to that having 7 years of tenure at the same job is incredibly valuable to have on a resume, but I've always been very insecure in my lack of secondary education. With that being said, would you be willing to take a chance on somebody in my situation? What advice would you have for me in regards to finding another good job? Well, I've certainly developed some skills I've spent at my current job. I have always been told that without a degree of some kind, most employers won't even read enough of your application to see what such skills would be. And all my advice is, any and all advice is greatly appreciated. Best regards, Michael.
I have a quick piece of advice for him, which would be there's a book by these two design professors at Stanford called Designing Your Life. And they use design principles to talk about thinking about things like career, transitioning careers, getting in the job. And there's a section of the book where they talk about how it's like 2% of people actually ever get a job from responding to a job application or an ad they see. And most jobs are got through different forms of like networking, reaching out, talking to people in exploratory ways. I think that book could be kind of helpful. I know I listened to the audiobook from the library for free. So something like that could be helpful. So that's one recommendation I would have.
So things are a little different now than they were maybe 10 years ago, where I felt like you needed to have an education in order to get your foot in the door. Now it's more about experience. And I often don't see education listed anywhere on job descriptions. If you do feel uncomfortable about it, you can take free classes on Coursera, or some of these others like Udemy, I think, or edX and some of these. So you can sign up for those, take a free class and just list it. You can also create a LinkedIn profile if you don't have one and just list all of your experience and then write that you are open to getting contacted by a recruiter. I wouldn't let your not having a degree stop you or make you feel uncomfortable, because I feel that Definitely. I have learned more on the job than I have in my MBA. And yeah. I don't think that you should feel uncomfortable about it.
Can I also just say you could lie? You could just lie too. If you put that you went to college on your resume, no one's ever going to check that. You shouldn't, but I'm just saying you could.
Yeah. Especially if it's a for-profit college that's since gone out of business and there's like no way to contact them.
That's genius.
I will also say, maybe I brought this up before, people in some of my family's Dutch, and when they came to America, they just said they went to a university that was firebombed by the Nazis. And so physical paper back then, there was literally no way to check. And they had a long and successful career at, I think, GE or GM as an engineer.
Wow.
Wait, wasn't your grandpa the doctor who didn't go to medical school who killed all those people? He said his medical degree wasn't? Was that you?
No,
Sorry.
No. But yeah, I think if it's a self-esteem thing, like I would not half of entry-level jobs now are like, my last job, I did like marketing for a fucking mental health practice. I had a degree in political philosophy. It's not like I was pulling out Baudrillard and being like, well, what about this? And that's like all of my friends, they have degrees in history and English and whatever. They take all these jobs. I would not feel self-conscious about that. I mean, the real reality is, I think the biggest hurdle is that sometimes these like automated programs that sort of reject, resumes like offhand might have like a filter where it's like, if they don't have a college listed on their application. But for any human, I mean, like once you've got, I don't know what you do, but let's just say like you're a manager in a factory. If I'm hiring for other manager factory jobs, I don't give two shit. Like you did the job before, you know how to do it, and you worked there for 7 years. I don't care. And even in my experience hiring people, whether it's thinking about like animators, designers, stuff like that, people don't care. I mean, if you've been doing it before, it's harder to get your foot in the door for an industry you haven't done before. But if you've done it before, nobody cares.
Well, I think the simplest advice here is figure out what you want to do. Reach out to people who currently do what you want to do, and don't ask them for jobs. Just reach out and say, hey, I'm interested in career switching. I think your work's really cool. I'm interested in your field. I'd love it if we could talk. In the normal world, you'd offer to buy them a coffee. You could just say something like, post-COVID, I'm happy to take you out for a coffee or send you a Starbucks gift card.
Sydney.
Yeah, but just have conversations with people, because I swear to God, most people I know that have jobs they like did not get that job from seeing like an ad. It's from reaching out, having conversations. And I know like networking can feel shitty, but it's not when you're just a genuine, real person like you are, who's genuinely curious about what people do in their fields.
You can also follow people on Twitter, which is a great way. Like people don't realize that that's a great way to find a job. So if you like have a dream company or a dream role, start following people, and they'll often post roles on there, and it'll be like, my DMs are open. And that's a great way to just chat with people.
Yeah. The one time in my life I ever got to hire someone, that's how I did it, via Twitter. So there you go.
Wow.
Okay, I think we probably need to wind things down. Is there anything else we wanted to talk about email-wise?
No, I think that's it. Thanks for everyone for calling us, for emailing us. Serby is helping one of our emailers with their, what's that called? Letter of intent, right?
Yeah, and their CV.
Yeah. So hit us up. Hey, listen, I'm going to say this now with no ability to definitely make this happen. I love it when people ask for advice. We'd love to help you. If we get enough advice things, we'll do a mailbag special where we just do advice and go through emails and voicemails the whole time. So just hit us with those. Maybe we do it before the holidays. That'd be a fun special. Alex's face right now is like, why is Byrne saying this? I'll never let him do this.
Sorry, I was reading the comments. This person says, again, this Dan Bilzerian person, I don't know who they are.
Oh, I know who he is.
They say that I look like them or am them. So
you are
Send
not,
a picture to Culture
You are
Binge
not
at
them,
Wisecrack.
but you look like them. But he's one of the worst dudes ever. But you do kind of look like
him. Shit.
Okay. Well, it's the beard in the hair. He's a good-looking guy. He just happens to be a piece of shit. So we're gonna wind things down. Once again, email us culturebinge@wisecrack.co. Call us 213-534-8807. Hit us up real hard, and we'll do a mailbag special. Also, rate and review the podcast. Tell us what cocktail it would be. Tell us what nation we would be in terms of what we remind you of geopolitically, or what U.S. president we most remind you of. And then if anyone does notice any weird audio stuff on my end on this episode, and they can cut this out in the edit if they need to, it's because I had some audio difficulties. Sorry for that. We appreciate your patience. Before we go, last thing, Serby and Alec, if people want to follow you on Twitter to try to get a job with you, how can they do that?
Suri Patel 22 on Twitter, and you definitely don't want to work with me.
I'm at Wisecrack Alec.
Michael O. Burns on Twitter and the other stuff, and I have absolutely no hiring or firing power in any way, shape, or form. But thank you so much. We will be back in 2 weeks. Write, review, call in the meantime, and we will see you then. Thanks, guys.
Bye.